What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A23. Now, this phone was just released a couple days ago, and so far, for the short time I've been using it, I've actually found it to be really impressive for what it is. So in this video, we're going to be going over everything you need to know about this phone to help you decide whether or not it's the right one for you. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with that being said, let's get started. So the Samsung Galaxy A23 has a 6.6-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 83%. So this is definitely a real nice display. For a phone in this price range, I really appreciate that they gave it a 1080p resolution, because so many phones in this price range end up having only 720p displays. For example, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, I got that phone for pretty much the exact same price as I got this phone for, and that phone does have a 720p resolution, whereas this phone luckily does have a 1080p resolution, so we got a real nice, sharp, crisp image. So if you're doing any kind of content consumption, whether you're watching videos, viewing photos, playing a game, pretty much anything, things are going to look really nice on this display. In addition to that, at 6.6 inches, it's not quite the size of something like a Moto G stylus, but the display is definitely on the larger side, so things are going to be a lot easier to see here. So if you're reading or something like that, that's definitely going to come in handy. As far as the form factor goes, with the 20:9 aspect ratio, it's a decently tall and narrow form factor. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Nowadays, 20:9 is pretty much the standard. There's some phones that are a little bit different, but for the most part, when I see a phone with a 20:9 aspect ratio, I'm never really too surprised. Another really nice thing about this phone is the brightness. Even though it's not something like a Super AMOLED display, the colors still do look really good, and it has surprisingly decent viewing angles. And then of course, to top it all off, we got a 90Hz refresh rate, and in case you don't know what that does, it's basically going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. So when you're doing stuff like streaming videos and playing games, you're going to get a much better experience. And then when you're just navigating through the phone in general, it's going to feel a little bit more premium. Now, is this really going to make a huge difference in and of itself? Maybe not, but it will add a nice premium touch and give you a better experience if you're consuming a lot of content. Now for storage, this phone is getting 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion. Keep in mind there's another variant of it that only has 64, but this specific phone in my hand is the international variant. It's the only one available right now. It's really only been out for 2 days, so it hasn't quite hit the US market yet. But keep in mind, again, this specific phone in my hand does have 128 gigabytes of internal storage, as you can see right here, so definitely a good amount of storage. So for the average user, 128 gigabytes of internal storage is definitely a lot, and you're probably never going to even need to use a microSD card. But if you're a power user, if you have a bunch of different photos and videos and stuff like that, and lots of apps on the phone itself, then having this much storage is definitely going to be a huge benefit for you, because not only do you get a ton of space on the actual phone, but with a microSD card, of course, you can also offload some photos and videos and stuff and save even more space. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, not a huge surprise there, but we do get a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, and there's face unlock as well. So let's go ahead and give those a try and see how well they work. So starting with the fingerprint scanner. There we go, one more time. There we go. So real fast and responsive. Definitely no complaints here. Works really well. And now for face unlock. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both the fingerprint scanner and face unlock are really fast and responsive, and it's definitely nice that we're getting two options here to get into the phone, so no matter which option you prefer, you won't have any issues unlocking this phone. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we got a water drop notch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. On the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So this is definitely a really nice camera setup. We're getting pretty much all the features here. We got the ultra wide camera, the macro camera, pretty much everything you can expect in a mid-range smartphone. And that's definitely a nice thing to see, because there are other phones like, for example, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, which again is pretty much the exact same price as this one, That phone doesn't have an ultra-wide camera, whereas this phone does. So if you take lots of photos and you want a good variety of different camera features, then this phone is definitely a good option. Now to give you an idea of what this camera can do, here are some photos taken with the main camera. As you can see, these photos are really high quality, definitely lives up to the expectation of a 50 megapixel camera. The details for sure are really sharp and the colors are pretty good. One thing I really like about these photos is how vivid the details are. Not every smartphone, even ones above this price range, can get details like that. So it's really nice to see that with this phone, we can get some high quality photos. So no matter what you're taking photos for, whether it's more casual stuff like social media or sending to friends and family, or even if you're taking photos for a website or something like that, while it might not be quite at the level of those upper mid-range phones or even entry-level flagship phones, this camera is definitely really high quality and it shouldn't be underestimated because it takes some really good photos. Now here's a photo taken with a front-facing camera. As you can see, I was using portrait mode, so it does work in the front-facing camera as well as the rear. And again, the picture definitely did come out pretty well, and I was actually pleasantly surprised here because the front-facing camera again is only 8 megapixels. And since we're talking about 8 megapixels in a mid-range phone and not 8 megapixels in something like an iPhone, I really wasn't expecting a whole lot. Now here's a photo taken with the macro camera. As you can see, I forgot to change the aspect ratio, so it probably looks a little small here, but you get the idea. The macro camera, while being far from perfect, definitely does work, so if you want to get some close-up detailed images, this phone will at least get the job done. Now here's a photo taken with portrait mode on the rear camera. Again, definitely really good quality. And here are some photos taken with the ultra-wide camera. Now there's a little bit of distortion around the edges, which isn't really that surprising, given that this is an ultra-wide camera in a more mid-range phone and not something like an S21 FE or an iPhone or something like that. But at the same time, the distortion isn't really that noticeable, and in certain situations, like these pictures specifically for example, it almost looks like an intentional stylistic thing. So the bottom line is, the ultra-wide camera, while not exactly being the best ultra-wide camera out there, definitely does work, so if you do want to get some nice pictures with it, depending on the setting and angle and all that, you definitely can get some pretty good shots. So overall, not only is the camera setup really good with this phone, but the quality of the images the phone takes is actually pretty impressive. So if you are someone who takes a lot of photos and you want a good variety of different features, and quality is also important to you when it comes to photos, then this phone is a great option. Now, while this phone is really great for taking photos, videos is sort of another story. With this phone, the video quality does max out at 1080p at 30 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, so that is a little disappointing. Now keep in mind, that's this specific variant of the phone. While I did hear a thing or two about this phone being able to shoot in 4K, as you can see right here, it really can't shoot in 4K. Only 1080p at 30 frames per second, that's the max quality. So while there may be some odd variant out there that for whatever reason can shoot 4K while this phone can't, this specific phone in my hand again can't shoot in 4K. Now that being said, not only can this phone not shoot in 4K, but honestly the video quality isn't really that impressive, so take a look. Here's a video sample I took in 1080p at 30 frames per second, and granted the lighting was a little bit low, but I've definitely used phones even in this price range that can take better videos like this in the same kind of setting. Now this is probably going to be okay for something like social media where you're not really too concerned with the quality, but if you want to take videos you're actually going to keep for something, then you might want to go with a different device with better video capabilities, like for example the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. Even though that's still not the best video quality in the world, it can at least shoot in 4K, whereas this phone again can't shoot in 4K and the video quality is definitely questionable. One thing I really don't like about the video quality on this phone is that the autofocus is pretty bad. When you're recording something close up, it does jump in and out of focus, and I find that really annoying. So overall, maybe if you want to get some quick B-roll or something like that, where it's just a small part of a larger video, then this phone will probably be okay. And then for Snapchat or something like that, same thing. The video quality on something like Snapchat, of course, doesn't even matter. But if you're trying to record longer, higher quality videos, then you can definitely do better than this phone. Now internally, the Samsung Galaxy A23 is getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 680 4G processor. Now keep in mind, as far as other variants of this phone go, the RAM is kind of all over the place. There are versions with 6GB of RAM, and apparently there's a version with 8 as well, but this specific phone in my hand has 4, and honestly, in the grand scheme of things, although it might make a little difference if you're multitasking or something like that, it's really not going to affect your overall performance. I mean, the iPhone 13 only has 4GB of RAM, and it's one of the fastest phones on the market, so really, although RAM does actually make a difference in some situations, it's not everything, so take it with a grain of salt. But that being said, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 386 and a multi-core score of 1644. And honestly, for a mid-range 4G phone, this is actually really impressive. There are phones noticeably more expensive than this that aren't nearly as fast, like for example, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022. That phone retails for around $300, whereas this specific phone in my hand did go for $250, and it is a lot faster. In fact, there are plenty of 5G phones that aren't even this fast. So while we're not necessarily getting 5G connectivity here, with the Samsung Galaxy A23, we are still getting a really fast processor. Even thinking back to last year when the Samsung Galaxy A52 came out, this phone is actually at that level or maybe even a little higher, which is crazy to think about because at the time, the Samsung Galaxy A52 was one of the fastest mid-range 4G phones. So to see the Samsung Galaxy A23 doing these kind of numbers is definitely really impressive. Now, as far as what you can do with this phone, you'll be able to do most activities. So whether you're browsing the web, going on social media, playing games, streaming videos, pretty much anything, this phone can do it perfectly fine. Now, if you're playing a really high-end game like Fortnite or Call of Duty or something like that, then you might struggle a little bit. But for the most part, if you're going to be on your phone a lot, doing more basic normal activities, like again, social media, web browsing, streaming videos on YouTube, something like that, then this phone is going to be a surprisingly great option. Now for the battery, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25 watt fast charging. So this is one of the best batteries you can get. Not only is it a super large battery, but we also get really powerful fast charging here. So if you have one of those really strong fast chargers, like a car charger or something like that, then this phone is definitely going to charge up really quickly and save you a lot of time. And of course, with such a large battery, you're going to get so much battery life out of this, maybe even multiple days. And as a result, down the road, as the battery degrades, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery, since you're starting out with so much more life than you need already. Now this phone does have Android 12, which is not really surprising, seeing that Android 12 is the current software and this is a new phone. And I do believe Samsung recently announced that the A series is going to be supported for at least 3 years. So again, in terms of longevity, 3 years is a pretty long time when it comes to smartphones, so you'll definitely be able to keep this phone for quite a while. Now another cool thing about this phone is that it has NFC, so if you want to use Google Pay, Samsung Pay, or any other contactless mobile payment service you might have, then you'll be glad to know you can with this phone. But now that we've gone over some of the specs, let's take a closer look at the device itself. So on the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right here, we got the power key that again doubles as the fingerprint scanner, volume down, volume up. On the top here, we got the noise canceling microphone. On the back, we got our camera setup and our flash. Now the back is made of a really plasticky material. In fact, it's pretty much plastic all around, which I'm not a huge fan of. The phone as a whole doesn't really feel cheap just because it has some good weight to it, but the plastic itself does look and feel kind of cheap, and unfortunately it does pick up some fingerprints. So I'm not a huge fan of the design, but again, the phone does have some good weight to it, so overall it's not really that bad. But in conclusion, my final thoughts about the Samsung Galaxy A23. Although it might not have the prettiest or most premium looking design, this is really a great phone for the money. You're getting a super powerful processor, a really good display with a sharp, crisp image and a decently high refresh rate, a great amount of storage, a camera setup that can take really high quality photos, a really large battery, and then NFC so you can use contactless mobile payment services. And even though this isn't really rare for Samsung phones, there are plenty of other phones, like for example every Moto G phone I've ever seen, that still don't have NFC. So I am really glad that nowadays Samsung does seem to be putting that feature in most of their phones. But in general, if you're not too concerned with 5G connectivity, and you don't really care whether or not your phone does have it, but you want a phone with a good display, a fast processor, a great camera, and lots of really nice features, then the Samsung Galaxy A23 is a great option. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you want to learn more about this phone, definitely subscribe to the channel because I will be making lots of videos about it in the near future. But that's it for today. As always, I will see you in the next one.